Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for making time to join us for this special EXO travel webinar. As most of you are probably aware, most of our webinars tend to be about our trips, our destinations, our products. And lately we've had things like yoga. I think we've done some stuff with elephants and even cocktail making. And some of my team asked me to lead a webinar. So this is a bit different for us, this topic, but I hope you enjoy it. And we'll make sure we're done certainly in no more than 1 hour. So a little bit about me. I am Scott Coates, Director of People Development with EXO Travel. I am based at our group office here in Bangkok, and today I'm sitting in my apartment. It's a bit of a muggy, cloudy day. It's rained and about 35 degrees, so being indoors in aircon is really nice right now. A bit of quick background about me. I'm originally from Canada, and I moved to Southeast Asia in 1999 to start what became a highly respected luxury travel company. I did that for my first 13 years here, and then I exited the company because I had an interest in doing something else. And that was spurred on by taking part in a leadership program in Hawaii. And in 2016, I joined EXO Travel as their training manager and started what is called EXO Academy up in the top right corner of the screen there. Actually continued on an annual series of trainings that we deliver to people in all of our destinations. And I got the chance to help them start that again and then start larger training sessions throughout our company. In January 2018, I was honored to have the chance to become Director of People Development. So what that meant was starting to lead our HR managers in all of our 10 destinations, helping to develop and set HR policy and ensure that our HR teams were working as smooth as possible. And so since 2018, I've been helping to manage our training and HR teams across all 10 destinations. And I have a personal interest in fulfillment, career development, and overall happiness levels for team members. And if you want to learn a little bit more about some of the travel passions I have, you can check out my travel podcast, Talk Travel Asia, which I run with our product manager in Cambodia, Trevor Ranges. So what are we going to take a look at here today? We are going to start by talking a little bit about EXO's COVID-19 journey so far. We'll share some best practices for remote working, talk a little bit about engagement and productivity moving forward through this crisis, and really wanting to make sure that we're ensuring that all of our team members and our company overall are learning, growing, and emerge from this crisis stronger. And then we'll just sort of end with posing a couple questions about the future of work. Now, I want to challenge all of you to find just two things in this webinar that you find are interesting, that you think you could maybe start to do and would like to start to do. So all of the training sessions we run with our teams, we say that to people. Look, you can't remember everything. Just try and find a couple that work for you. So try and do that for yourself today. So these are just a few of the 940 EXO team members we have across 10 destinations from Japan all the way down to Indonesia, and 14 sales managers who work around the world. And much like you, we were extremely surprised when this COVID crisis started and continue to be surprised week by week how it develops. I remember returning from a family trip to Singapore over Chinese New Year at the end of January, and all of a sudden, we were all talking a bit about this coronavirus and what is it? And it was originally viewed, or we thought, and I think much of the world thought, as an Asian problem only. And we saw it go from one of our destinations being China and impacting business to then impacting Japan and so forth, country by country. And then as we went into February and late February, we found, okay, we're now not really able to offer trips in some countries. And then as we got into March, we saw European borders close. So not only were our destinations having to close, but the destinations our guests from were having to close. And we had to adapt very quickly, and as I'm sure all of you and your businesses had. And the challenges have been great. It's been also a very good learning experience, but a challenge nonetheless. So some of the challenges for EXO going remote So in March and April, depending on our particular countries and the government requirements in those countries, we began to move into remote working situations. And there were lots of challenges that go along with that. The first, of course, after we take care of our guests and rearrange trips and so forth, was to find a way to continue to offer world-class service and communications with our agents, our partners, our guests, but also to ensure that all of our team members going remote actually have computers and internet connection, can access and use all of our XO tools, and to really find ways to ensure that effective collaboration continues and that staff and teams remain connected and engaged, not just for 1 or 2 weeks, but for however long this thing goes on. And none of us really know at this period how long this crisis will continue, how long we'll be working remotely. And also thinking about ways to create opportunities for learning and development for our team members during this crisis and during a remote work time. And really ensuring that beyond the initial few weeks of rearranging trips, and even in some cases in Vietnam, hosting and taking care of guests that were in quarantine, ensuring that there's something to do for people, because one of the worst situations any of us can end up in after prolonged remote working and in this crisis, that people find there's nothing to do. So what did we do at XO when we prepared to go remote? Well, I think back to February, and it made me realize that having long-standing values in place as a company was a really good springboard for us to start. So we have 7 values at XO that you can see on the right-hand side of your screen. They're around offices, and they really form the backbone of everything we do. So I think the fact that most team members had these in common gave us a good starting point. But we had to quickly think of a bit of policy to set, thinking about some basic ground rules of how we'd like people to work remotely, how we'd like them to communicate, but then also ensure that we're providing some training to do so, because the reality is most of us grow up and we're schooled thinking about a world where we work in buildings, we work all together in the same room, the same building, we work for say 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. We haven't really been schooled or cultured to think about working remotely. This is probably a fairly new decade-long concept. More progressive companies have started to offer it a while back. We at XO were actually preparing to roll it out formally throughout 2021. So having to think about how can we quickly school and equip our team members who maybe aren't as familiar with the idea of what effective remote working looks like, what some of the pitfalls can be, and so forth. And as we design policy and guidelines, is design everything you do thinking about the 98% of people that actually care and follow the rules. I think a lot of companies make a mistake of designing rigid rules aimed at the 2% of people who will just as easily waste time and break the rules at their desk at work as they could at home. So really think it's important to think about all your policy as aimed at the 98% of people who are sincere and will generally do a good job. So back in February, we thought, you know what, we might have to end up with some countries working remotely, maybe some offices in countries or a whole company. But do we really know if all team members have access to do that at home? So we very quickly had all of our HR teams survey their team members and find out, do you have a computer at home? Do you have an internet connection? And are you willing to work at home if it's an option and we need people to do it? And we found that most people had computers. What was interesting is we realized you have to be flexible, because our destinations are from very advanced first world countries such as Japan to some developing countries like Myanmar. And for example, in Myanmar, not a lot of houses have the option to get a LAN connection or fiber internet, and most people are actually using their mobile devices for connections. So it might not be the fastest, and the cost might be a bit. So while you're trying to maybe manage cost, you also in some destinations had to be cognizant and willing to maybe help people offset the costs if they had to say use their phone as their internet connection. And in some cases, we had people take entire desktops and monitors back home and just make a record of that so that they would have a good machine to work on. And then think about workspaces, because some of us think about remote working as being this great opportunity, in part because we maybe have a nice space at home we can work. the reality is somewhere like Japan, where space is very expensive, a lot of people live in very tiny spaces and they're not that keen on being in them and working all day. It's not as practical as somewhere where people have more room. So you immediately start to realize that this, what might seem like a benefit to some people, is actually not a benefit and actually inconveniences them a bit. We then quickly thought about tool support. What are the tools we need our teams to use, and how can we provide that extra training and know-how when remote? So we tend to use Tourplan, but also Google Suite. So we're using Google Calendar, Drive, and the associated tools for collaboration, Hangouts for meetings. So we've done some of that training over the last few years, but we made sure we got some videos on our e-learning platform, which I'll talk more about later, with short little videos where people can click to learn how to use simple features that we hope can help people through this remote time. And then really promoting the importance of schedules and communication. Now, I think this is a double-edged sword. Is some people could find that you're trying to overregulate or be too serious, but the good practices of keeping calendars and schedules and communicating with your teams is more important than ever in a remote situation. So we really set up team calendars for people so they could see when people were working and when they weren't working, when they're available and when they aren't, and encouraging frequent meetings and more communication than people would normally have. So an underlying concept that I view as really important in this remote working period is something that we introduced and explored last year in EXO Academy 2019. And EXO Academy is a yearly session of practical skills and personal professional development skills. We design courses and then we go around to all of our 10 destinations and we host 1 to 2 day sessions with all of our team members. And last year, one of the themes that ran through a number of our sessions was the concept of psychological safety. Now, this starts with having a good work culture, which we like to think we have, but really we gave people 6 things that they could do as individuals to help grow psychological safety on their teams. So this means people being comfortable to put their hand up with a question with their teams, feeling comfortable to share that crazy idea, feeling comfortable to confirm something for the 3rd time in a meeting just to be sure everyone's on the same page. So that is something we identified as really important for our teams last year and introduced. Actually, Google, in a famous study about 4 years ago, found the #1 thing, attribute in high-performing teams was that those teams had psychological safety. So in these remote times, it's more important than ever that we continue that practice and continue to help people remember that and help them realize that, look, say something a 2nd time, a 3rd time, to make sure that while you're talking over Skype or over video conference, that everyone definitely understands. Be willing to have someone ask a question multiple times and be very, very patient with them when they do, because we do not want any misunderstandings or errors when we're working remotely. So we need to make sure that we're even a little safer than usual and making people feel very safe to ask questions and to offer ideas. So let's get into some remote working best practices. Now, if you Google this, you're going to find hundreds of them, as are the facts and the things we share in a lot of our trainings. Yeah, they're obvious, but what makes an effective person or effective remote working is not doing one thing. It's taking a collection of actions, practicing those actions over time, making them habits, and then putting together a series of good habits that then helps you be a higher performer. So all these things I'm going to share, you've probably encountered. They will seem obvious, but if you actually put them into practice, that's where the hard work starts. And if you put a number of these into practice, I think people will have a higher level of success. So the real starting point, and I practice these all the time. Right now, I'm actually wearing my colored EXO travel golf shirt that you saw in my profile photo, but that's getting up at your regular time. Have your breakfast as usual, but then the big one is have a shower, shave, do whatever your morning routine is when you were usually going into the office, and dress up a bit. So I wear shorts most days because Bangkok's a hot place, but I always wear at least like a collared golf shirt. And the reason is that sets me up psychologically to be ready to work, to know that, okay, now is a work day. I've actually had my shower, I look good, I feel good, and I'm dressed a little nicer. The danger of not doing this is you can find yourself at 3 in the afternoon sitting around in your underwear and a t-shirt that you slept in the night before. And the rub-off effect of that is you're probably not performing at quite as high a level. So just dressing for success, getting clean, throwing on slightly nicer shirt than usual, that can really have big impacts on the kind of work and how productive you are in a day. Now, the next one is helping people get serious and really think about where they work. And obviously, you want to try and have a comfortable space, a quiet space. For every person, that's going to be different. It might be in your bedroom, it might be in your living room, or maybe you're lucky enough to have a proper office. But you should establish at least one space, ideally maybe even 2 or 3, that when you go there, that's your space. So that when you sit down, your brain is already getting primed and knows it's time to work. It's time to do something different. So in my case, I have a little table in the bedroom, but I actually have changed the things that are on the table. There's none of the usual day-to-day stuff on this desk. There's stuff that's associated with work. I actually put a picture of my family that I had at my office. And I also go down near our swimming pool, which is closed in this crisis period, but it's a nice area to sit. And there's a table there, and I'll take and set myself up there. So usually I alternate between the two spaces. The point is you want an effective space, but you also, by doing so and having an effective space, you really set your mind up again that when you sit down there, you're ready to work. Now, the big one, if you haven't worked remotely, is the challenge of those work-life boundaries. Now, I've worked remotely a lot over the years, and I think it's taken me a long time to become reasonably effective at it. Again, I mentioned it at the beginning, is most people, we've been brought up with the idea of work being in an office and those parameters. We've never really been trained or taught how to work effectively remotely. So there's some of those basic things. On a personal level, try and hold regular work hours still, like actually identifying when you work to yourself and keep them as close to normal as possible. Or else you can find yourself doing your personal things mixed with work things all day, and it's 9 p.m. and you're still doing both, and you didn't really do any of them particularly well. The other thing is making sure in a nice way that you sort of educate your family or the people you're sharing your living quarters or your working quarters with about this new work remote situation, and saying to them like, look, mommy works from 9 till 6. I'm going to take lunch with you at noon, and I'll come out and have a couple breaks. But let them know what you need and maybe not to come into your work area at times. Another great tip is just even maybe put headphones in your ears when you don't want to be disturbed, whether you actually have music or not. I have a colleague who she said she's taught her kids that, hey, when mommy has headphones on, please don't bother her. It won't be more than an hour. But really kind of setting those up for yourself and also everyone you live around in a nice way. But if everyone knows what's happening in the rules, it can really help set yourself up for success. Now, this again, in principle, is a very, very easy thing, but I will say that most people don't do it. I am the opposite. I'm probably a little over-organized, but planning not only your day, but your week and your month can have a great impact on how you manage yourself, how effectively you use time, and so forth. So what we really try to promote to all your teams, all our teams, is use your Google Calendar. Put everything in it. I put pretty much every project, every piece of work I'm doing. I use green for meetings, yellow if it's something outside. The point is, plan your day, plan your week, plan your month. Let others know what's going on. You can share some calendars with your team through, Google and other platforms. And then the big thing is think about reviewing that calendar at the start and end of every day. And we'll go into that more. But really, having it planned out sets you up for success. And then you saw this slide briefly. Eat that frog. Well, what is this? If you're familiar with Brian Tracy, he's a productivity and leadership guru. He wrote a book years ago called Eat That Frog. And the underlying concept that we've shared in Exo Academy for years is tackle that biggest, hardest, ugliest piece of work first thing in the morning. So he calls that the frog. The frog is the ugly thing. So your biggest, hardest, ugliest piece of work, put that in your schedule as the first thing in the day. So that means you go into your day when you have your highest level of energy, knowing that I'm going to tackle the hardest thing. You get that done, you get that out of your way, and then at least you have won in some form for the day. So that's a really big one. We encourage everyone to put that frog at the start of their day. And another big one is reviewing your day at the start and the end of each day. Now, this sounds really simple, but it kind of sets you up for success. I liken it a bit to, we all have to know the rules of a sport. Before we can play football, we have to know how it's played and who's playing. So I personally start my day with coffee and reading news, and I actually open my schedule, my calendar for the day first thing, and I look at what's planned for the day. And then when I'm out jogging and so forth before work starts, I'm actually kind of thinking in the back of my mind about what I've got to do that day. I'm getting prepared for it. So then I go through my day and I follow my calendar. But then the last thing we should do is look back on our day and celebrate the things we got done, reschedule the things we maybe didn't get done, and then look at tomorrow before we finish. Last thing, look at tomorrow. Is it set up in a reasonable way? Do you have that frog at the start? Is it balanced? Is it achievable? And then when it is, okay, shut off for the day and go spend time with your family or whoever. But now you've prepared your mind for the next day. You already know what you're going into the next day. That simple habit and act absolutely works. This next one, we based a whole course around it a couple of years ago in EXO Academy, and working in blocks of time. Again, simple concept, tough to pull off, especially with social media and phones that beep and send messages and updates all the time. But what this means is the concept really came from a book called Deep Work by a guy named Cal Newport. Now, this is a really, really good book if you'd like to learn more about how to become hyper disciplined and focused and organized. But the concept here is to do meaningful, challenging work that really requires brain power, requires thinking and concentration and effort, you need undisrupted moments. So that means you need to set yourself up for 30 to 90-minute blocks of time to do this kind of work. So these are writing the new manual, writing an incredible trip proposal. They're blocks of time where you don't want to be distracted and you schedule it. 30 to 60 or 30 to 90 minutes. The reason no more than 90 minutes is science tells us that people need a mental break after 90 minutes. So in your calendar, we encourage people schedule those blocks, 30, 60, 90-minute blocks. During that time, you should be able to not need to go to the toilet during that time, not need to get a drink because you get everything you need, and you just sit down with a goal. And then you can have it in your mind that at the end of that block, you have a little reward for yourself. And we'll get into rewards a little bit later. But simply working in blocks of time can really, really ramp up your productivity and effective use of time. Now, a big one for effectiveness in remote working is over communicating. And people can become agitated and irritated when they feel that managers keep checking in on them or people say the same thing. But when we are remote, we should almost always assume that people didn't understand us, or they didn't hear it, or they didn't get the message. Also remembering that email and text chats, a lot of context is really lost. So we have to make an effort to over communicate with people. And one of the best things you can really do, and I'm sure all of you there have been using Zoom and these other tools, but is every time you're meeting with somebody, if video is possible, do it. Now, people worry maybe, oh, my house doesn't look good in the background or my hair's not so nice. No problem, just give it a quick brush, and we all understand we're working in challenging situations. But the point is, if you can see each other, you get so much more of the message with those facial expressions. And there's just a true connection between people. So in all possible instances, instead of just hitting chat on that app you use, hit the video, use the video. It makes a huge, huge difference on connection, on understanding, communication, productivity, a big, big one for remote situations. And tying into that blocks of time concept is the importance of small celebrations. Now, this might seem silly, but you tell yourself, after I do this 60-minute block of work, I'm going to go out into the living room. I'm going to talk to my son for a few minutes, and I'm going to have a coffee and I'm going to sit back down. Or it might be just going to use the toilet, or it might be for going for a walk around your block. The point is, come up with a list of, say, 10 things that can be little celebrations for you. It could literally be standing up and saying, woohoo, I did it. But when you're not with colleagues, you don't have people to stop by their desk and chat with, you do need to make sure that you motivate yourself. And having those small celebrations is a big thing. Again, especially for getting through 30 to 90-minute blocks of work. Make sure you have them in there. Now, getting outside, this one can be a bit more challenging in this COVID period, but it's something we encourage all our team members in regular time to do is, look, best to get outside once a day for lunch. If you ate lunch at your desk, just go out for a few minutes. But in these times, get out of your cramped quarters you're remote working in. So this could literally mean going out even into the hall in your apartment and just walking around the hall or standing on a balcony. In my case, I mentioned our swimming pool's closed, but it's actually a nice outside area. So I'll just go down there a couple times a day. I mentioned I work down there sometimes, but I'll just kind of pace around. I'll walk a bit. We can fortunately go to 7-Eleven here. So sometimes I'll say want a Coke Zero. I have one in my refrigerator, but I'll just go walk a few minutes to 7-Eleven. Point is, get out. Don't spend 24 hours in your remote working environment. Get outside that door. It's really important. So we're going to get into a few of the things we're really thinking about, and I think a lot of businesses and individuals working for yourself, if any of you work on your own at home anyway, should really be thinking about, because it's really easy to become demotivated when you're working remotely. I think the first week or two can be really exciting. Maybe you watch Game of Thrones for an hour. It's kind of fun. You're taking a little more of a break than you would, but over time, especially again in say our business, where once the trips are canceled or rearranged and so forth, we find ourselves in a situation where there's not a ton to do. So you've got to make sure that we create relevant, engaging tasks and things for all team members, right? Part of that starts with holding your regular team meetings. So if your team has a meeting, usually on Tuesdays at 9, make sure you continue to have that meeting on Tuesdays at 9. In fact, maybe you want to have 2 shorter meetings throughout the week. There doesn't even have to always be a ton of business stuff to talk about. Maybe you could bring up a great party from the other year or a little article you found and share it. But just have the habit of that regular check-in. It can be really good for maintaining engagement. Develop dream projects and seize this time as an opportunity. We are going to be heading into slower months ahead. We still don't know when travel is going to open up, but this should be the time to tackle some of those big frogs we talked about earlier. Think about what are the trainings you've always wanted to do? What are the big projects that you thought, oh, I just wish I had time to rewrite our SOP manual, whatever it is. This should be the time where every person in every department is taking on some of those projects. So challenge your teams to think about what those things that have always been thinking in the background about, make them reality now. The hard thing is most of those things aren't often sexy tasks. They're not really fun. They're really tough to get started at. And actually 80% of getting something done is just getting started on it. But take this time as the opportunity to work on those dream projects. This is the absolute key moment to upskill yourself and upskill your teams. Now, that's going to mean something different for every person. A lot of it could be work-related skills and knowledge, but some of it could just be personal development. But we should be looking for ways to make this part of your culture. It's certainly part of ours. This could be even hosting department training sessions. Maybe, again, there's that training that a manager's always meant to do but has never done it. Well, host it. Host it now online. I'll give you an example. Our adventure director of adventure, Matt Blench, has an annual adventure managers meeting, usually in May, where all the adventure managers meet in one of our destinations. This year, that's not possible, but he is still hosting a 2-day session, and he's making the presentations as normal, the activities, he's sharing readings and videos for them to consume before, and he's doing this training. This is the time to do it. Also look at some tools that are no or low cost that you could find modules, readings for your teams to undertake. We like a site called Mind Tools, which has everything from little videos to 100-page plus modules on leadership you can work through. Coursera and Udemy are great online e-learning sources. They have a lot of free courses or low-cost ones. There's lots out there, but think about making some of these available for your teams. And then you could even challenge people to then share what they've learned with others. So maybe someone takes a course on effective public speaking. You then ask them, hey, could you prepare a 15-minute review of what you learned and share it with your teams, right? Other things that we're looking at doing that are effective, and you'll notice all these things on the last slide and this one are no cost or very low cost, key in these times. Last year during EXO Academy, one of the sessions we did for each person was a case study. Great thing to do in these times, remote times. So we are now thinking, what happened last year that would be worth examining as a case study, or what might happen in the future? And we set up a case study with a facilitator, create a few easy questions, get them online, and talk about a topic. But a case study is a perfect thing to do, or just a discussion group. Think about a problem, something that's happened, something that could happen, and get groups talking about it. Or even social groups. Maybe you just set up, I have a friend who his company set up something about, I think, Pokemon Go or some game, people that like it, and they get together once a week and talk about it. Another example is someone in EXO, he's from France, and he's offered to teach French, I believe, twice a week for 30 minutes online. Set those groups up for people. It keeps them connected, it keeps them learning, it keeps them growing, and it'll help you emerge stronger. Another thing is if you have people in different offices or countries, just schedule a week where you set up kind of learning dates where two people that work in the same department in different regions get together and chat and get to know each other and share best practices. Or a great thing now, start cross-training jobs. Have somebody learn a bit of someone else's job. That helps in emergency situations. You now have people that can do multiple jobs. Or if you have to downsize, maybe you end up with people that can do multiple things at once. Now, being somebody that spends a lot of his time thinking about training and learning and growing, something I'm interested in doing, and we haven't done in a formal capacity yet, it's not quite the time, but I'm really interested in hosting a COVID-19 postmortem. That means kind of down the road looking at what happened, how did it happen, what things have we learned, what things did we do really well, what areas were the toughest to deal with, and if something happens in the future, what could we be doing to be more prepared? So this is just a personal interest and one thing we may do at EXO, but I hope you see the point from the last two slides is there's lots and lots of things you can do to help people stay engaged, connected, caring, growing, and these are all pretty low cost to no cost things. What's the difficult part about it is actually executing, having a few people that are champions and cheerleaders of this and tell people about it and organize it and get people doing it. But this will keep people in these slower times ahead engaged, connected to one another, to the company, and keep believing in what you're trying to do. So a tool that I'm now really happy we developed, and it's proving to be more valuable than we really originally thought, was we developed an e-learning platform starting about a year and a half ago with my colleague Martin, and he's done actually most of the hard work on making what you see on your screen happen. But we started with 8 e-boarding modules you can see on your left, and the idea was because we're all over the world with people, we have over 40 nationalities working with us, we wanted to ensure that everyone coming into the company was getting at least a certain base level knowledge about our industry, our company, what we do, why we do it, and how we do it. And beyond these 8 modules, we've then since developed 18 more. Some of them are around management, some of them are around things like negotiation, even things about generations working together, different cultures working together. And we had planned to gradually roll out these new modules throughout the year. But what we've now done is we're going to accelerate that rollout. We're going to make sure now that we're actually requiring people to do a certain number of modules that are most applicable to them in the next few months to again, take advantage of this slower period, but help people stay engaged and make sure people are smarter and coming out of this better as we emerge. Because the reality is we still don't know when is this going to end. Is it 1 month? Is it 8 months? And what does the future look like? We don't know, but we absolutely want to make sure we're learning, we're growing, and we're preparing ourselves to emerge stronger. And I encourage all of you to try and do the same in whatever way works best for your particular organization. So I just want to introduce a concept that I learned about when I started at XO, and I really try and keep in mind as a manager, but also in these remote times. And if you've ever read anything by Dan Pink, he wrote a book called Drive about what motivates people years ago. And so in everything you're doing with your teams, working remotely, whether it's how you encourage them to run their meetings or accomplish their tasks, Daniel Pink said that people doing simple routine tasks don't really need a lot to stay motivated. They kind of like the monetary rewards. But people that are doing complex work, highly intelligent people doing complex work, actually what motivates them are three things. Mastery. So make sure in whatever you're doing with your teams, the work you're giving them and how you're engaging them, you continue to give them an opportunity to become masters at something, to learn something, to become really, really good at it, and ideally be able to teach others about it. Now, you put that with autonomy, especially again in remote times. Let people know what's expected and what the goal is, but kind of really give them the chance to do it in their own way. That is highly motivating. Now you pair that with purpose, ensuring that every task and thing people are doing, they understand the why. Why is this important to our organization? Why is this important to your department? Why is this important to you? So he calls it MAP, mastery, autonomy, and purpose. So make sure you build this into things back at your work to motivate high performers doing complex work, but also make sure in everything you're doing in these remote times also ticks the MAP boxes, and you'll have a lot more success. So the last little slide that I'm thinking about and we're thinking about a lot, and you're probably thinking about, is whenever this ends, what does the future of work look like? Very quickly, people are starting to think, do I really need that one office that holds everyone in the same room for the same hours every day? Or should I be thinking about an office half the size and half my team in any one day is working remotely? Also thinking about the fact that some people who've never worked remotely before, and when they come out of this, aren't really maybe going to want to be in an office every day. So maybe you're going to have schedules where people come in some days and some days are remote. Also the possibility that some people working remotely hasn't been particularly enjoyable, practical, or rewarding, and they're going to want to be in offices more. Maybe you want to split one big office into two smaller ones, set up in better locations for where people are living, and you make it easier for them to come and go. But there's probably an opportunity for all businesses to save money on high rental space. So we should all be thinking about what does the future of work look for us, both from a cost and performance side, but also on benefits for our staff and what's going to make them happier going forward. So a few resources that we really like, obviously xotravel.com, you can go to that. I really like a site called Delivering Happiness. Now, this is an offshoot of Zappos, who's an online shoe company in America, and they started consultancy years ago that helps organizations create happiness and fulfillment and happier people and customers. And if you go to their site, you'll find all kinds of interesting readings, little videos to kind of get you thinking about new ideas and working remotely more effectively. Another one along the same lines is Great Place to Work. I really enjoyed a course called Science of Wellbeing. This is from Yale. It's offered on Coursera platform. The best part is it's free of charge. And the last couple of years, it has really taken the world by storm. So if you or some of your staff are looking for something to think about, the basic building blocks and elements that make us happy in a personal capacity and at work, it's a really enjoyable, interesting course to do. Another site we find useful is Mind Tools. Short readings, longer leadership modules, but they offer free memberships up to paid corporate memberships, and that's really worth something exploring. If you want to learn a little bit more about me, you can go to my LinkedIn page, or you could send me an email at scott@xotravel.com. I'm pretty happy to get together and answer any questions or have a quick chat. And just before we go to questions, I like to show this picture because it reminds me of those non-remote times. And this was last May here in Bangkok. We had our HR Leader Summit. So we had most of our HR leaders from our 10 destinations come. We spent 3 days together and we focused on tackling some HR challenges for the coming year. But in addition, we took part in some EXO Academy sessions, and that's Martin on the very far left, who works in training with me and has helped create some of the great tools, especially the e-learning platform you saw there. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. I hope you found those 2 things, again, as I mentioned at the start. Find 2 things that worked for you, 2 things that you can apply to yourself. Maybe you can share with your teams. Go back through this presentation, watch it on the re-record, and just try and find a couple things you can start to apply. Do you have the tips how not to get distracted? I've tried working in blocks, but then a call comes in or a very urgent email or a team member texts me over Skype. At the end of the day, my blocks didn't work out at all. Hey, this happens to all of us. Don't feel too bad. So we have the tips in various forms. We have them in learner's notes from some of our courses that we've led over the years. Unfortunately, I can't share those courses, but look, the things I find that work well are a collection, again, of small things. Those mean I generally put my phone on silent. I also I turn off notifications on most apps. And then I put my phone often in a drawer out of sight. So I'm going to work on that block. I just literally, I turn off my Skype, I turn off all the apps on my laptop, put the phone out of sight so I can't see it. If there might be something urgent, maybe I'll put it face down. And yeah, and then I've got nothing dinging, flashing, popping up around me, and just try and create that absolute quiet situation around me. It's a pretty basic thing, but just turn off all those distractions, out of sight, out of mind. I also sometimes tell people that, look, like I'm contactable from 8:30 to 10 in the morning and then slightly after lunch. So I'll sometimes just advertise that to people like, hey, if you have a question, if you need me, can you email me at these particular times? Or sometimes I'll just tell somebody, you know what, could you send that to me in an email because I'm in the middle of something soon and I'll get back to you later in the day. So in some instances, I find it's managing other people and sort of setting those parameters for them. Okay, hey everybody. A great meeting is a meeting that's thorough, that's interesting, and finishes early. So with that in mind, we are going to end this session. Again, if you'd like to converse further, you can get in touch with me at Scott@XO Travel, or just look at my LinkedIn profile. I'm pretty accessible. I'm on Twitter as well, ScottCoates73. Thank you again so much for your time. It means a lot. I hope you got some value out of this. Stay safe, stay healthy, keep traveling when the time is right. We look forward to working with you in the future. Bye-bye for now.